welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello, Esquire, and Evan Ginzburg. Evan, would you like to introduce our guest for tonight?
Absolutely. He's my friend Dobie Maxwell. He's a comedian, a writer, a podcaster, longtime wrestling fan, longtime George Clinton fan. We're like twin brothers from different mothers. Make out funk, the P-Funk. There he is, Dobie Maxwell. How are you?
Evan, I couldn't be any better. The mothership is flying over New York and in cyberspace all the way to the Great Lakes in Wisconsin.
There you go.
Is that where you're at right now? You're in Wisconsin?
I'm in Bristol, Wisconsin, between Milwaukee and Chicago. So I can get rush hour in two cities.
How much snow is there right now?
Didn't get a lot. We got about 2 inches, maybe.
Oh, okay. Because we're going through a huge drought out here in California. So I just assume everyone else is getting the snow we're not getting out here.
I'm hoping for global warming. I want to be. I've shoveled enough snow for about 6 lifetimes.
Wow. Come on out to California. You won't see a snowflake anywhere within 100 miles of where I'm at right now.
I love California. That's the thing about the road life. It's like you get a little taste of everywhere, and it's a treat, man. I love it out there. I love New York too.
Yes, that's great.
Dobie, I'm glad you mentioned that because as a headline comic, you get in your car and you drive hundreds of miles, much like wrestlers, much like musicians. Tell us about the road life from your perspective, the good, the bad, and ugly of it.
Well, it's funny. I always tell people, it's like most people drive 30 to 45 minutes to work an 8 to 10 hour shift at a normal job. Road performers drive 8 to 10 hours to work a 30 to 45 minute shift. So it's exactly the opposite, but the time outlay is the same. A lot of my wrestler friends talk about it. Say, well, you're lucky. We have the same drives, but you don't get body slammed 18 times a night, which is true. You know, comedy, sometimes you get a little body slam to your ego. It can be really tough. You know, the heaviest thing I lift is a microphone. But sometimes, you know, you get in some biker bar, some hecklers get you, and then you're 1,000 miles from home after the show looking at the ceiling thinking, boy, did I hate my father that much that I had to, you know, get love from strangers? And I think wrestling is the same way.
Dobie, I have a question. Would you rather be in front of a bunch of bikers that heckled you or in front of an audience that didn't make any sound at all?
Well, you know, that's a really good question, and I think I've had both, you know, thousands of times. And the one thing I think is a little different than from wrestling than comedy is in wrestling, at least you have your person in the ring. It's your teammate, it's your partner. You're trying to put on a show for the fans. Yes, you get physically hurt at times, but in comedy, one night I could be in front of 2,000 people and staying on someone's couch. The next night I'm staying in a 5-star hotel and I'm working on a picnic table at an outdoor gig at somebody's home. It's so different every night, and that's the hard part, I think, while being a comedian is you're by yourself. Sometimes you work with other comedians, but most of the time you're by yourself out there. That's the hard part. Oh, so, yes, I have had silence and I have had the bikers. So you react either way.
And yeah, you have there's no way you can call a timeout or do a rest hold or, you know, a sell like an outside spot, you know, like you're knocked out for a minute or two while you gain your bearings, you know.
Well, sometimes you're over and sometimes you do the job, just like in wrestling. And it's in comedy when you do the job, that can be very painful. But the rewards are high. The highs are high, the lows are low, and it's not for everybody. Just like driving a forklift for 40 years is not for everybody as well. I mean, you ask wrestlers, you ask musicians, rappers, comedians, whoever it is, would you give up the lifestyle? No, this is what I do. It's who I am. You know, hopefully the highs outweigh the lows. Not always, but we got good stories for those that don't.
See, as a wrestling manager, I've always felt like there's a real correlation between stand-up comedy and wrestling managing, but it is different in the fact that I have areas where I can concentrate on. I don't have to carry something for an entire show. You know, it's not, the focus is not entirely on the manager, nor should it be, right?
Right.
Don't paying money to see the manager out there, but they like the added part of it, you know, that it adds to the story element of it, and it's different when you're I've always wanted to do stand-up comedy, and to be honest with you, I think I'm just not brave enough to carry a show for an entire, hour or hour and a half or whatever you do.
Well, you start out in 5-minute chunks. I think you can channel your energy and focus it from a wrestling manager. It'll be fun. I mean, it was Evan that I have to thank for introducing to me one of my idols, Johnny Valiant. And I never got a chance to work with him in person. Evan and I were looking at setting up a show, and when tragically he passed. But we were on the phone and we talked many times, and the similarities between it. And it's so funny because he called me so humble. Oh, Mr. Maxwell, I've heard about your comedy. My name is Tom Sullivan, a.k.a. Johnny Valiant. I said, I used to pay my paper route money to boo the hell out of you. I know exactly who you are. Luscious Johnny, handsome Jimmy, baby. And he was so flattered that I knew who he was. But any entertainment, I think, is so hard to do that you respect it. As a kid, I hated Bobby Heenan. I lived in the Midwest and saw, I don't know who your favorite managers were, but there was Captain Lou and Freddie Blassie and Jim Cornette. I got to know Jim Cornette a little bit as well. And I think that is such an important part of the show. So if you can do wrestling managing, I think you could transfer it into comedy. And I'd be more than happy to help you if that would get your yayas up. It's a hard thing, but I'll help you anyway. Because nobody helped me when I started. I say I have nothing to lose by helping other people. I really enjoy doing that too.
And Dobie, since you mentioned all these great managers in wrestling, I find that the appeal of a lot of them, they were really funny. Lou Albano was funny.
Sure.
He was like an improv artist. Heenan was funny.
Yes.
Kaufman.
Yeah, Andy Kaufman, of course. But
Blassie too.
Yeah. These guys were really sharp. Johnny Valiant again. But, there were menacing guys like Gary Hart. They weren't all funny. But what's your take on that? I mean, as a comedian and as a wrestling fan.
What I think, what I didn't know when I got into it is, while there are people that play a dumb character in comedy, there are no dummies that are comedians. And I really think that there are no dummies that are wrestling managers. People always say, well, wrestling is, that's only idiots watch that. Well, it might be for idiots, but it isn't made by idiots. You know what I'm saying? It's very, very smart wrestling theory. You always hear people like Eddie Graham and people like Vince McMahon Sr. who knew about the mind of psychology. And I got to start out as a ring announcer, and I learned about psychology. I thought, boy, this is no dummy at all. You're working an entire crowd, and you're making the crowd pop in the ring with your partner. And just as you are on stage as a comedian. So there's so many similarities there. And I think humor, you have to grasp a concept, then you have to go one past it to know where the twist is for the humor. So while you're playing an idiot, it takes a lot of brains to figure that out.
Yes, interesting. Johnny used to tell me, Johnny Valiant, that they would go to the studio, the Valiants and Lou Albano. They would basically say, okay, August 2nd, you're wrestling Dean Ho and Tony Gurria. This is the venue. And then they would just improv. It was total improv comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Every interview, hour after hour. They would sit there all day and knock out like a month's worth of bookings and cut promos. So these guys were improv artists, whether fans realize it or not.
Well, they're also playing a character. I think the most famous comedians are a character, a persona. Dennis Miller said your comedy persona character is basically you pumped up times 10. It's a caricature. It's an exaggeration. It's a cartoon. And I think wrestlers are the same way, and managers are the same way. I got to be a manager a couple of times. I was a local enhancement talent. The guys for AWA lived in Milwaukee where I grew up, and they had their own federation. So I was the ring announcer, and they needed a manager one night. They said, okay, what kind of gimmick can you come up with? So backstage, there was a wheelchair and a blanket. I said, okay, put me in the wheelchair and the blanket, and I'll go out there. So I got on the microphone and said, I would like to thank all you nice people in Palmyra, Wisconsin. I'll never forget it. It's a little town. It was a high school gym. I'd like to thank all you nice people in Palmyra, Wisconsin for letting a man in my condition participate in professional sports. And I got a huge round of applause and a pop from the audience. And, of course, when the referee's got the back turned, I get out of the wheelchair. I stomp on the babyface's head. I get back in the wheelchair, put the blanket over my legs. And the Palmyra police had to escort me out of town because they hated me that bad. And I thought, how much fun is this?
Yeah.
It was really a good time.
So you had no desire to pursue it further?
No, I did not, only because I was doing pretty well at comedy at the time. And, the wrestling, as you know, a lot of the smaller federations, even this is back in the 80s, I get a payday of $20. It was fun, but I could make a living at comedy, and I couldn't make a living at wrestling back then at the time. So I would love to have done it full time, but I so respect the people that do it. It's funny because I had a radio show, and the WWF at the time was coming through, and Freddie Blassie was doing interviews, and I was the morning guy on the station in Lansing, Michigan. So I just, from the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, this is Freddie Blassie, and he's like, kid, wrestling. I want to meet you. So the thing is, we had a first prize winner on the radio station. It was a kid about 10 years old, and his father. Father was an auto worker. Couldn't have been better winners. We were in a limousine. They sent a limo for us. And I said, let me take the kid in the back. I'll find Freddie Blassie. I'll get some autographs. So the main event that night was Macho Man Savage against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in a revenge, I hate your mother, grudge match to the death. I'm looking at the back of the arena for trying to find somebody to get an autograph. I open a closet. There's Macho Man with his little half granny glasses on, and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat over a barrel, and they're playing cribbage, a card game, cribbage. And the kid looks like, oh my God, these guys are supposed to hate each other. And Macho Man looked up and said, welcome to the wonderful world of wrestling, kid. And he closed the door. And it's like he found out. He never said anything after that. But it's like those are the kind of experiences you can't replace that, man. Wrestling is in people's hearts, just like comedy is, and I love them both.
There you go.
So tell me, do you watch wrestling now, or do you find?
I have officially become the old fart. You damn kids, get off of my lawn. I love the old school wrestling, the baby face and heels. Now there are no baby faces and heels. No one sells. There's no heat anymore, and it's not the wrestling that I grew to love and enjoy and respect. And I don't have anything against the younger wrestlers today, but it's not a story like it used to be, at least to me. So it doesn't entertain me. I don't find. You guys watch it? I don't.
Barely.
Yeah, barely.
Well, I mean, we try to. I mean, there's so many different. One of the things that Evan and I have talked about is that when we were younger, there really was only one source of wrestling for most of us. We would only see like wrestling from one federation. Here in the Bay Area, it was mostly AWA stuff, and obviously the WWF was big, where Evan was in Madison Square Garden. And I'm sure did you grow up in New York, or
I grew up in Milwaukee, so AWA was mine. Vern Gagne, Mad Dog Vachon, the Crusher.
Right, absolutely.
So yes, you went to the Cow Palace?
Yeah, no, I went to a lot of shows in Cow Palace, and it was Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson.
Pat Patterson.
Rocky
Pepper Gomez.
Yeah, was a big deal, and Rocky Soulman Johnson was a big deal, out here, and Peter Maivia and so forth. But what I was getting to is that you had less choices back then, and we have so many different choices now. Do you find yourself? I mean, we're always drawn to looking at AEW stuff, and then there's NXT stuff, then there's WWE stuff, and then there's a Global Force Wrestling or whatever, that pay-per-view that you showed me a few weeks ago. GCW, thank you. So there's a lot of different competitors to that. You find yourself being distracted somewhat by that too.
Well, that's a really good question. I would say, I know I'm old and crotchety now, but as a kid coming up watching AWA on TV, I was so hungry for wrestling, I would buy the magazines, the Bill Apter magazines. And I would see, Bruno Sammartino and Ric Flair and Harley Race in the magazines and pictures of these guys. And I'm thinking, man, if I could only see them wrestle, they must be just superhuman. And I never saw them. So I think the imagination of what those guys might be like is more, how can I say, romantic or than actually seeing all the wrestling. It's like baseball. You hear baseball in the 50s. You see highlights of Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. But, now you can see every game, every pitch of every game on cable channel. Sometimes there becomes a glut and it's too much. Do you guys not think of it? I don't need to see that much wrestling. I mean, maybe I see what I want to, but I like the imagination in my head of imagining how good Bruno Sammartino was. I never saw him wrestle.
I saw Bruno probably 100 times over the years, and he was like a half god to us. He was like Saint Bruno, and the night that he lost to Ivan Koloff, it was dead silence, and women were crying. That's what he meant in New York, Bruno. So it was a different era. Now everybody's smartened up and they know it's a work. And back then I would say the vast majority of fans were marks, and we just loved these guys and hated the villains. And talk about job issues. I mean, these guys used to get stabbed.
Yeah.
Jack Mulligan was stabbed. Piper was stabbed. Moolah was stabbed. I mean, crazy. So it was a different. You're looking 50 years ago at this point. It was a different world and pre-internet and different fan base. Absolutely.
Would you not say, though, when I found out it was a work, I liked it more? I was a mark, and I loved the baby faces. But look back, the heels are the nice guys. You know, you leave your dog, you leave your grandma with the heels. The baby, Mr. America, that's the molester. Stay away from that. The heels are the good guys. I hate to say that. It's true.
Interesting.
So,
There's some truth to that.
So, Dobie, I wanted to ask you, in wrestling, what is funny? And in wrestling, what isn't? What now about wrestling isn't funny and is why so many storylines and so many bits that they're doing aren't getting over?
Well, here's what I think from a Mark's point of view. I was rolling around it. I was never in the ring per se, but I looked at it, and you might, on a whole card of wrestling, if Evan is watching the WWF and you're watching AWA, you might have a big high spot, a suplex, a pile driver, something like that, a real big move, and it's only in the main event, and it's the last event of the evening. You know what I'm saying? That the heel loses to a whatever, Boston Crab, whatever it is, and then up until that, it tells a story and builds to a crescendo. And then now you see 14 high spots in the first match, so the tension and the storyline is off. So I think it's completely like Howard Stern talked about when he got on off terrestrial radio. He said, if I can say the F word anytime I want to, the comic tension is lost. He goes, I might get a lot of money, but it's more when I'm towing the line in regular radio. And I think the same thing with wrestling. If you're going to build up when what was Bruno's finishing hold, Evan? I don't even know what it was.
It was a backbreaker when he was younger, but after
the bear hug. I remember he did the bear hug for a while.
Okay.
Which is not, a high spot by any stretch.
No, it really isn't. But I'm saying, you see so many things now, and these guys jumping off cages, and that snooker thing off the cage that comes to mind, and even that now, that was the main event. One time. Oh my gosh, now everybody's doing it in the opening match.
You see a guy kick out after something like that.
Oh yeah.
That'd be a middle of the match type thing. You'd see maybe about 20 other finishing moves before, a match like that would end. And then it would end because somebody's foot is on the ropes.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, don't you think, too, everything's a craft, whether it's wrestling or comedy. Evan's talking about George Clinton. I got to know George a little bit. I met him a few times, and he couldn't have been any nicer. And Pedro Bell, the guy that did the album covers, artist, lived in the Chicago area, was a friend of mine. I hired him to do my CD covers. So George and him had a falling out. So long story short, I hooked George and Pedro back up a couple of years before Pedro died. And It was really great because it was a happy ending, blah, blah, blah. And Pedro and I went to see a show. We saw George before the show. Hey, guys, thanks for coming out. And the opening band, they played for 4 hours. Why they needed an opening band, I don't know. So the opening band goes out, and they're like, come on, Chicago, let's hear. They're doing all the cheerleading and rah-rah and stuff, and they couldn't get the crowd going. Here comes P-Funk on the stage 5 minutes after they're gone, and they had the crowd right there because they were artists. It wasn't the stage. They didn't need any cheerleading. It was the dues that they had paid for a lifetime. They had the presence to go on there and blow the roof off the place. And I think with wrestling, it's the same way. The wrestlers are in there, and with just a twitch of the eye and a look, all the way in the back of the arena, who are the great workers of all time? I mean, you look at Ric Flair, and I never saw Buddy Rogers. Did you guys ever see him? I hear rumors that he was fantastic.
He was really before my time.
Me too.
So Flair patterned a lot after Buddy Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I mean, just a sneer. Nick Bockwinkel was the big heel. Now, did you see Bockwinkel?
Oh yeah, I saw Bockwinkel in New York, New Jersey. Yeah.
And he was such a sneering heel. Could not have been a nicer guy outside of it, but inside he just knew that he had something. He said, "What I want is people are going to come in there. Maybe half of them think it's a work, and after that last match, I want them to go. It was fake, but those last guys, they were really going at it in there." He goes, "That's my hope when I'm in there last." So I respect him for that.
And Dobie, I enjoy your writings on Facebook. You. Mentor a lot of younger comedians, and I find your columns really interesting. Like one column recently, you were talking about a show that just went beautifully, and it was a natural high, and everything was, perfect. And then recently, you wrote about a gig that the mic wasn't working, and it was a horror show. So, what's the balance? How do you handle such extremes and such, a short amount of time.
I think you have to be mentally tough. I know that sounds like a Tony Robbins rah-rah course, but again, that happened last night. And I get there and there's no mic and there's no spotlight, there's no stage. I'm surprised my voice is still in there because I had to basically, yell at these people they said, oh, I want an hour. So 63 minutes. That's a long time. I mean, you hear about wrestlers going to Broadway for an hour. That's a long time. That's a lot of
with no mic.
No, Mike, and it took probably all my 30 whatever years of doing this to learn how to do that, and it was for not the greatest pay, but after COVID, I don't know how gas is where you guys are. It's about $4.15 here, $4.15 a gallon. So by the time I drove there and drove back, I basically barely broke even. I made a couple of bucks.
My friend, it just passed around $6.
Oh my gosh, it's going to kill all kinds of entertainment, live entertainment. It is.
Yeah,
not just for the entertainers, but for the people that go out and see the entertainment. How can you buy a ticket and afford all that gas? This is really serious.
I have a near 100-mile commute each day. So,
oh man,
yeah, it's talk about I said to a client the other day who was paying me. I was saying, this money that you're paying me is going straight into my gas tank.
It's for everybody. It totally is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's tough because the last couple of years we've suffered from COVID and a lot of venues, didn't get a lot of crowds due to COVID. And now, and we're still not out of COVID either.
No,
There's still some, people. I heard today that Obama came down with it. He was dying.
Really? I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
So
don't you think eventually we're all going to get it? I really think how can you avoid it?
Again, there's a meme out there which it shows some people from The Walking Dead that are all surrounding each other with like machetes and fending off the zombies. This is the last 4 people who haven't gotten COVID feel like it.
That's funny.
And poor Evan has already suffered from it. And
I had it. My wife had it, and I'm sitting on the couch. And my brain is going, I have to go to the bathroom, and my body's going, I can't get up. That's how bad it was the first day. A week later, it had blown over, but it's no joke. I had 7 friends die from COVID. 7.
Oh, that's horrific.
Yeah. And none of them were old, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. So, yeah.
I think it did affect everybody across the board, and just you never know. Like my birthday happens to be March 14th, so whenever it started, I had a show on my birthday, and March 15th.
Happy birthday tomorrow, too.
Thank you very much. Old age is officially here. I'm getting my free meal at Denny's. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You get off my line. So,
but I have my show tomorrow. So get yourself a free pizza.
All right. Yeah, I'll get that. Whatever I can get at this particular point. So my point is, I had my show on my birthday, and then COVID shut the world down, and entertainers did not expect that. I had to get a day job for a couple of years to eat.
Sure.
So at a convenience store, and it's like, people, oh God, you're really funny. You should try to be a comedian or something.
Yes.
Well, thanks.
Did you get any material from being a convenience store?
I did. And my grandpa as a kid taught me to never be mean to anybody that serves you, whether it's a waitress or anybody in the service industry, because it's a really hard job. And if you should do it to find out how hard it is, so you'd be extra nice to these people. And I just found out how rude the average public is, and I find it appalling and disgusting. Sorry to see that. I mean, I try to be nice to everybody. It's one of those.
Do you have any stories, any examples from when you were working in a convenience store? Like any really truly outrageous people that came your way?
Yeah, there was a big guy. He probably could have been a wrestler. He was about 6'6" and 350 easily. And we nicknamed him Grumpy. He just came in the store every day, and he's just mean. Bark as answers. No matter how hard you tried to be nice to this guy, he just wasn't up to it. So I don't know if he's touched by an uncle, whatever the situation was. He was not a nice person. So it's a very busy convenience store. People say, you work in a convenience store, that must be easy. No, the chain I work for was one of the busiest in the world. And there's always a line of people, and there's a line of cashiers, and they came from the right, like an assembly line. So there was an older lady that was very nice that didn't understand the phone app. And, I barely understand it myself, but she was already in line, and she came back to ask me a question, and it took 15 seconds to answer her question. So Grumpy is all mad, and he goes to the next cashier, The next guy comes to me, and this guy happened to have, I think it was, counted 10 or 12 big hard lemonade, iced tea alcohols, and he's trying to pay for it on the government welfare card. I'm trying to explain to this guy how the government's not going to buy you booze. That's not going to work. I'm trying to be nice about it. So Grumpy walks behind him and said, "Hey, we were in line first. You should have taken us. Do your job." And he said it just like my father would have said it. And I snapped. I looked at him and said, "Drink a Diet Coke, you fat tub of blankety blankety blank."
Wow.
And it just stopped the line. And I'm a comedian. I'm like Bruce Lee. You want to verbally attack me, I'll rip your heart out and show it to you before you die. I got 35 years of nightclub experience. So I went after him. I went after the guy that's trying to get the booze for free. I looked at the lines. Did anybody else have childhood issues we need to get? So I'm Clint Eastwood cleaning out the bar in the movies. And so it was 7.5 hours into an 8-hour shift. It was a long day. So I came back the next day. Nothing happened. Work a whole shift. Came back the day after that. The district manager had seen it because everything's on tape. And they said, "Come here." They let me go. And I said, "Wait a minute. All the times I came in, stayed late, showed up for a shift when nobody would show up, all the good things I did, there must be 75 of those. One thing with a grumpy guy at the end of my shift, and you're going to fire me." Yep, you're gone. So that's how life is out there. So again, please be nice to people that serve you. Waitress, McDonald's. Hey, thank you I appreciate it. Thanks for that Big Mac and fries. It means a lot.
My father was a taxi driver, and he used to drive 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. Same experience. He'd meet wonderful people, miserable people, junkies that would put a gun in his ear, etc. So on, everything imaginable. So he used to say to me, "Respect anyone that does an honest day's work."
Yes.
Somebody has to clean the toilet. That's what his exact words. He says,
and I couldn't agree. He was a great man. That's why you're a good guy. I could tell right off the bat. It's like it's a respect thing, and you can't fake that. You could just sense it in people. And I hate to say, I'm not one for any kind of ism, sexism, racism, ism. You treat everybody well, and if they treat you poorly in return, well, that's on them. It's not on you. And I think the people that are the lowest when they come, especially in a convenience store, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. How can I help you today? Hey, this is great." They perk right up. "Oh my gosh, this person is treating me like a human being." It really is a reciprocal thing. So
now, when people find out that you're a stand-up comedian, do you think that you get more interest from people, or do you think they treat you, like, I better not say because I'm going to be in this guy's act,
No, they always say the same thing. First thing, tell me a joke. Or the second thing is they tell me the most filthy, vile, nasty, disgusting, racist, filthy joke. And then they say the same thing after they tell me, "And you can use that." No, I don't want to use that. Thank you for your time. I have enough material, but thanks.
Funny.
I try not to say that. I'll say anything. I'm a proctologist assistant. I never get on a plane or go to, "What do you do for a living?" I never say comedian because it never goes well.
Yeah. Dobie, I've seen in New York some of the greatest comedians ever to grace a stage.
Sure, you have.
I've seen Dick Gregory, Mort Saul, Brother Theodore, who was a genius.
Yes.
Andy Kaufman. I go back 40, 50 years seeing all the greats. And Dick Gregory used to come out with the newspapers from that day's newspapers, and just do 2.5 hours, all improv. Whatever was in that newspaper, he would play off of it.
I have so much respect for not only Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory served people. He was an activist for social causes to the detriment of his career. Now, anyone that's willing to do that, I got a lot of respect for. Mort Saul, I don't know if he did it to the detriment of his career, but he did the same thing in San Francisco. He would go on Hungry Eye and read the newspaper as well. I think now what's really sad is the average person does not read the newspaper. They don't care what's going on. They're blithered at by CNN or whatever. They don't make up their own mind, I think, and that's really dangerous. I think, there's an audience for people that thought back then. I love Dick Gregory, loved Mort Saul, all those guys that were socially conscious. Lenny Bruce was before my time, but to study what he did and to open up for comedians, everybody that steps on a stage, including me, owes a lot to all those people.
Yeah, Lenny Bruce was getting arrested, for cursing on stage, and he spent more time in the courtroom than on stage at the end. So, he really sacrificed. And I think a lot of the young comedians today wouldn't even know who he is or was.
Well, that's why you talk about my Facebook group. I try to tell people like that. So you don't have to like these people, but you have to know who they are. Even George Carlin, who's passed away several years now, I got a chance to meet him right before he died, and he couldn't have been any nicer and humble and just what a wonderful guy. And I asked him about this thing in Milwaukee, is my hometown. I don't know if you know, he got arrested in Milwaukee at a thing called Summerfest, which is the biggest music festival in the world. It goes for 10 days in the summer, and they had a comedy stage. It's off and on, but for years they did. And he said his 7 words you can't say on TV on this comedy stage. And he got arrested, and it was a really big deal. It happened in 1972. I remember it. I saw it in the paper, and I asked him about it. I said, "What? Tell me about the Milwaukee thing." I remember seeing it. He goes, "Well, to be honest with you, there was band stages everywhere, and nobody was listening. The only people that were listening were the police that were looking at me. So I did my 7 words bit, and they heard it, and it was considered profanity at the time. So they came backstage and arrested me, and you'll see me handing my jean jacket to my wife. He had a T-shirt, jeans, and a jean jacket. He said, that's where all my drugs were. So
Wow.
they patted me down for drugs and stuff, and I didn't have any because I passed my coat to my wife. That's where my drugs were."
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's a famous story.
Who would be your Mount Rushmore of comedy?
You know, people ask that question just like with wrestlers, and I don't think, is Bruno Sammartino better than Ric Flair? I don't know if it's better. It's what made a mark with you. To me, Rodney Dangerfield is the king. I really love him. I think George Carlin, just for his prolificness, is that a word? And while I'm probably going to start some controversy now, I never found Richard Pryor funny.
Really?
And how can you not find him funny? Maybe, I mean, the things he talked about, drug addiction and things like that, were not my life. But I respect his influence. I respect his, to this day, how much he had. So I'd have to put him on the Mount Rushmore just out of a respect thing. But his comedy didn't make me laugh. And I didn't mean any disrespect by him. He was an excellent actor. And maybe I don't want to argue with anybody, but comedy is a subjective thing. People like you don't like him, you like this person, you like them. And I have to say this: I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandpa was a Russian Jew, and he turned me on to Myron Cohen, who's a Catskills Borscht Belt comic at a young age. Yeah. So I'm 8 years old looking at Myron Cohen, and my friends are like, "Who is that?" But just the subtlety and the greatness of his performance style, so understated. He'd have to be on my Mount Rushmore. How about you guys? Who are your comedians on your Mount Rushmore?
Buddy.
Well, I wanted to say that I put in my Mount Rushmore the 4 comedians that I've actually seen live in person perform. And that is, one would be George Carlin. Had a chance to see him, and he was just, like you said, just really engaged the audience. He owned the audience. He could make them laugh at just an expression, and it was really an amazing.
Where'd you see him? Just curious. What venue did you see him?
This was close towards the end. He was in Napa. He performed over in Napa. It was one of maybe his last 5 or 6 performances. So, yeah. Okay. I've had a chance to see Jerry Seinfeld when he was doing his original stand-up routine stuff in the early 80s before he made it, on his show.
Great.
And
he's great.
A lot of people underrate him, but he really actually was very, very funny just doing his stand-up routine. Now I'm from Marin County, so the patron saint of comedy in Marin County is none other than Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, yes.
And I saw him during a stand-up comedy competition in San Francisco where he walked on. He wasn't even announced as one of the comedians. He absolutely stopped the show and did improv for about 30, 45 minutes and just tore us up. The entire audience, just everybody, all the other comedians were just standing there watching him basically preach to the comedy to the choir. And we were all just enraptured by him. And the final one, and kind of underrated, but I've just seen him for a New Year's gig, and he makes me crack up every time I see him in anything he does. And that's Patton Oswalt. Love his comedy. Love his comedy. Just really, he doesn't think too much of himself, and he's very humble guy, but he's able to sort of have that sort of self-effacing comedy that you don't see much these days. He doesn't pretend like he's greater than anybody else, and that he embraces the smallness of his being to be able to be in touch with his inner nerd, and I really love him for that. So
that's a great review of him. I got a chance to work with him one night, and he was all you said, a very nice guy. Audience loved him. Really great choices. Very, very good choices. Evan, how about you?
Well, there's a big difference between most influential and the ones I enjoyed the most. So let me just discuss the four I enjoyed the most.
Okay.
I love Brother Theodore.
Oh yeah.
Love that guy.
He was great on Letterman.
We used to see him. We used to see him in New York. He ran. He ran from like the 50s to the 90s or so. I mean, he was there forever. My mom used to see him, and my mom was like, "You have to go see Brother Theodore." And the guy was a genius. It was, talk about characters. It was like a wrestling character.
Sure.
I mean, yeah. Gilbert Gottfried just makes me laugh. I mean, the guy's just hilarious.
Oh, love him. Love
Kinnison,
him.
I love Kinnison. And I would say Pryor. I used to see Pryor in the movie theaters, packed movie theaters, and they would show his concert films, and I just thought the guy was brilliant. I have a Pryor story. I saw him at the very end, and he was kind of crippled up, and he wasn't moving well, and he had these giant cue cards, and he did like a 45-minute set, and he was like a shell of what he was. He was a headliner in a theater, and we were used to seeing like a 2-hour Richard Pryor show when he was at his peak, and we all knew it was the end. And as he walked back to the dressing room, like everybody reached over just to touch him. It was really, it was beautiful and sad at the same time.
It's funny that you bring that up. I was in Los Angeles at the Comedy Store out there, and I saw out front tonight Richard Pryor. I thought same thing. It was Richard, that must be a 20-year-old sign or something. Sure enough, he'll be here tonight. And the same thing. I mean, they had to carry him up, one comic on each side out to the stage, and it was very painful. It's like kind of like watching Muhammad Ali versus Trevor Berbick at the end. It's like that's not the Muhammad Ali that I remember, and I felt bad for Pryor.
Yeah. So as far as importance, I would say Lenny Bruce and George Carlin and Cosby. Unfortunately, Cosby was a brilliant comic.
Sure was.
And maybe a Dick Gregory for the color line and opening doors.
I think also Joan Rivers for Phyllis Diller for a women.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Probably Phyllis Diller before Joan Rivers, but Joan Rivers too.
Toady Fields, very early.
Toady Fields. Oh yeah, absolutely fantastic. And I think to be a student of comedy, just like a student of wrestling, you appreciate a good show even more. I mean, again, like I say, when I would watch wrestlers and I see these guys out there, it's like especially the heels, that they could just get the 10,000 people hating them was fascinating to me.
Yeah, not to say comedy is a dying thing, because there's always. Comedy is as ancient as drama and tragedy and all the other things that make a performance what it is. But I find if you look right now at the biggest movies that have come out, comedies have not done very well. They're not right. You don't have like a big Something About Mary or a Spinal Tap or something like that has everybody talking about how funny a movie is. Do you think it's just the times that we're in with COVID and Trump and all these other things that have kept people sort of like not in a laughing mood, or do you think that it's that there may be something deeper that is keeping the comedy from being?
I think cancel culture is really doing a lot to put the kibosh on a lot of things that are funny. And I'm all for respecting people. I'm all for not punching downward. I think a guy like Dice Clay would punch down at people that were weaker. If you're bunching up with the president, like, for example, I'm the only comedian I know that has been heckled by Donald Trump. You mentioned Donald Trump. Love him or hate him, I'm not going to get into any kind of politics. I was in Florida 20 years ago opening for Rosie O'Donnell. And the club owner said, Donald Trump, they were friends at the time. I don't think they are now, but they were then. Donald Trump's going to be coming in. He was married to Marla Maples. That's how long ago it was.
Wow.
And, the show will be going. It's a 2-act show at a big comedy club. Most clubs are like 200 people or less. This is probably a 450 or 500 seat room in West Palm Beach, Florida. So Rosie had a house there. Trump had a house there. So I'm on stage, 2-act show. I see the doors open up in the back. I was already on. The people walk in. It was 2 bodyguards, Donald Trump and Marla Maples. So he sits down and I'm doing my act. All of a sudden I hear, "When are you going to get funny?" Ooh. I know it's him. So I said, "Look, I know who you are. Nobody else does. Why don't you just sit there and look stupid like you do at work all day? I'm running the show. I'm taking over this. 30 seconds later, I'm still waiting. It's him. He wants to be the center of attention. So the sound and light guy turns on the lights and the sound in the club, and they see him, and it's like, oh, it's Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump. He goes all the way through the room. So now he picks up his bar napkin and he's waving it like the white flag and says, oh, no, no, no. Heckling me is like tipping over a wheelchair saying, I get you. When am I going to get funny? When are you going to finish that haircut that you got started with an egg beater? I just went after him for, probably 3 minutes. I don't remember exactly what I said, but the crowd is just going wild. I said, okay, can I please continue with the show now? All right. So brought Rosie up like she was Hulk Hogan. It was a great show. So at the end of the night, one of the bodyguards came back to the dressing room and said, Mr. Trump thought you were very funny. I said, well, he could get off his ass and come tell me that himself, but thank you very much.
Wow.
Out, they didn't pay their tab. So Trump said he thought the bodyguards were going to pay it. The bodyguards thought Trump was going to pay it. So it made the Tampa paper, the West Palm Beach newspaper
Trump
the next day.
The bodyguards were going to
pay. They didn't pay, so he left $100.
Wow.
So I was talking to my buddy.
Something.
Yeah, in Milwaukee, I was talking to my buddy. He had the paper there. So it made the paper in Milwaukee. Local comedian gets heckled by Donald Trump, and it made the West Palm Beach paper. So I still have the article somewhere. So when he got elected, I thought, oh, I got a great story now. I got heckled by a future president.
Yeah. Did you ever think that, like, at the time you were heckling him, you would be giving, crap to a guy who could have sent you to Guantanamo?
Well, he probably could have, and I don't know if he's got a sense of humor or not, to be honest with you. I don't want to get into politics. I just don't. Whatever people's views are, I respect it. I don't want to argue. But, I mean, you just look at that kind of situation. I think a lot of times those guys like that are used to being in charge and they're used to being bullies. And when somebody fires back, I mean, I had nothing to lose. Am I going to get fired? So the crowd absolutely loved it. And it was just a moment in time. I'll never forget it.
That is a great story.
Dobie, I have a friend. His name is Nico White. He's been doing comedy since he's 15.
Mm-hmm.
He's 28 or so now. The guy's done thousands and thousands of shows. He's at the stage now where he's, a headline comic, touring around the country. What would you advise a young comic who's trying to get to that next level? You
had mentioned him to me a while back, and I try to, as a friend, and I respect your judgment. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to keep my eye on it. I'm starting to hear this guy's name, and I'm hoping to meet him in person just to get backstage. Hey, Evan, we're good friends. You got to get, you can't do it alone. I think that's the major mistake that every comic makes. Wrestlers, I don't know, you need to get a federation. If Vince McMahon likes you, okay, he'll take you. You need a Vince McMahon of comedy. And unfortunately, a manager-performer relationship is like a marriage. And it doesn't work more often than it does. Like Woody Allen had Rollins and Jaffe. That was his management for probably 40 years. And they had a plan together, and they put Woody in certain things, and he knew what he wanted to do. A guy like Nico, you're 28 years old, you've been doing it your whole life. Relationships get in the way, and the COVID gets in the way, and you got to make a living. And sometimes you make decisions in your 20s that you wouldn't make in your 40s or 50s. So I would just like to see him get a mentor, whether it's you or someone that's got a little more experience that says, hey, man, I like your talent, but let's think of the bigger picture rather than what's the next thing. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. He's acting now, so maybe that could be the jump.
Yeah.
But tremendously talented. I've seen him do 1 hour sets. I mean,
yeah.
He's got it. He's really got it.
Here's one thing. I saw John Cougar, Mellencamp, Fawcett Majors, Rodham Clinton, whatever his name is these days. And he's had an interview, said, I had a lot of good things happen to me in the 1980s, but I didn't enjoy any of them. Because everything I did, I was always worried about the next thing, the next video, the next album, the next this. And now, Nico at 28, he'll get some TV spots. He'll get maybe a CD or a download or a special or a Comedy Central. And if you can, learn to enjoy it, and I know that's hard to tell somebody, but I think that's what I would advise, having not met the guy myself. But I would just like to see him breathe and be a human being as this is happening. It's hard to do, but that would be my advice.
Well, he loves it. He loves it, and tremendous talent. And I just like to see him make it because he certainly paid his dues. Thousands of shows, waiting for that 5 minutes at 2 a.m. when he was a kid.
Yeah. I'm surprised they let him in the clubs that early. Did his parents have to go take him? Because 15.
I don't know.
I'm saying to get in the clubs, that was a hard thing when I started out. You couldn't do that. So hopefully.
He's very tall. Maybe
okay. Maybe people think he's older. Yeah,
so Dobie, tell us and tell our viewers, what other projects you're working on right now.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, buddy. As a matter of fact, I happen to be.
This is not scripted, by the way, viewers. This is I'm just going off the top of my head, and I just happen to be hitting all your bullet points.
Well, if you can see my hat here, I was asked to host a diabetic-themed podcast called Just My Type. Oh. I was diagnosed with diabetes in 2011, and that's you got type 2, type 1.
No, my friend.
Type 1.
Type 1, and it almost killed me. 17 years ago, about 17 years ago.
Well, hopefully we can have you guest on our show then, and hopefully you don't have it.
I'd like to be on your show and talk about my experience, because I don't produce a drop of insulin, so I can talk a lot about type 1 diabetes. Too much.
We'd love to have you. We just launched about 6 weeks ago. As we record this, it is in the middle of March. We at the 1st of February, and I was doing a show with another friend of mine in the Wisconsin area, and I try to be funny and witty. I've been on radio for 20 plus years, and the guy is out of Canada. His wife has diabetes. It's called Global Wellness Apps, and he's a very entrepreneurial guy. He wanted to put together a podcast that was light, and our theme is we have fun, but we don't make fun. So when somebody comes on, we want you. It's not all clinical and boring. And
I'd like to very much be on your show.
You're going to be on. We're going to have you on.
We'll talk about that off the air, but I'm very interested in it.
So justmytypepodcast.com. So if people that are over 35, now my co-host is a lovely young lady. Her name is Sammy Parker. She lives in the Los Angeles area. She's 22. She was type 1 diagnosed at age 13. So her story, she's a star. And I'm thinking, the whole thing, we meet on Zoom and thinking, she's looking at me, who's this old fart that's going to be my co-host? I'm looking at her. It's like, oh, I hope she's not a bitch. Oh, my God. She could not be any nicer. She's smart. So we've hit we're the Regis and Kathy Lee of diabetes.
Wow.
It's one of those things where, and we hit it off really well. And we're going to, National Diabetes Month is in November. National Diabetes Day is November 14th. We're trying to put together now something at Brad Garrett's Comedy Club in Las Vegas, where our listeners can come out and we're going to record a live episode. You guys are invited if you're going to be out in the Las Vegas area, and just we want to have a community where type 1s and type 2s can talk about their experience. So we'll have you tell your diagnosis story. Mine is fascinating. Yours, I mean, everybody's got their story. So yes, we'll definitely have you on there. And it's one of those things where every comedian has to find a niche of people that aren't being served. Jeff Foxworthy said he came up with his redneck idea from watching the Kings of Comedy with Bernie Mac and Steve Harvey and Cedric the Entertainer. He goes, no offense to them, there's a lot more rednecks. He goes, that the population was more for us. A guy named Russell Peters. I don't know if you know Russell Peters out of Toronto. He is of Indian descent. There's a lot of Indian people that live in Toronto.
I've seen him live. He's great.
He is great, but I'm saying he started with his own people, his own ethnicity, and moved away. So now there are 34 million diabetics of all races and creeds and age groups and ethnicities. So if I can be the comedian of diabetes, I'll take that, I'm just another white guy in the comedy clubs, just another Caucasian. You don't want that. So this is a thing. So absolutely. So thanks for having me on to plug that alone. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, please. But what else, if people were interested in getting all of you through social media, how would they get in contact?
Well, you can get to my, I have a Facebook group, The Maxwell Method of Stand-Up Comedy. I do not claim to invent comedy. Colonel Sanders did not invent fried chicken. He was smart enough to put his name and face on his bucket. Yes. I put my name and face on my bucket. I've made every mistake there is to make. So aspiring comedians come along. I try to help them. I try to mentor them. And if that's my legacy, I'm a utility infielder in baseball. The fans don't necessarily know that, but every professional baseball player knows those are guys to have in the dugout. Every baseball team needs one. So I was on Craig Ferguson. I had my moment in the sun. I'm not a star. I'm the first one to admit it, but I played in the major leagues, both in comedy and in radio. And I enjoy helping people. I enjoy mentoring people. So if that's my legacy, I'm cool with that.
There you go. Dobie, plug anything else you'd like to plug?
I also I'm trying to think, mentor comedy classes. What else? That's about it.
When's your next stand-up gig?
I haven't been doing a lot of them now. COVID has really affected here. I'm on the border of Chicago and Milwaukee, and Chicago very much shut down due to COVID. Wisconsin is open a little bit, but I am one where a craft. Wrestling is a craft. Comedy is a craft. You have to do it full time, to me, to maintain a level of excellence. I think so. So I cannot perform comedy every week. I used to be able to work any week I wanted to. Now the gigs just aren't there, and the money's not there, especially with gas prices. So I'm kind of focusing on the diabetic show and mentoring others. But I still like it. But boy, the grind of being out on the road, it's fun in your 20s. After that, it's the grind.
Wow.
Eric Clapton said, "I love the gigs. I hate getting there." Couldn't say it any better.
There you go. There you go. Dobie, thank you so much for appearing on the show. It's
Thank you guys.
awesome.
We hope to
catching
have
up
you on
with
again as a guest soon. Yes.
And I'll have you on our show. Anything I can ever do to plug whatever you guys are doing, let me know, guys. Good guys hanging out. That's the way it should be, man. Thank God for the internet that we can do that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dobie. Thanks
Peace,
so
man.
much.
See you guys. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Now it's just the two of us, and unfortunately, we have to talk about this week. Before we get into even the sad news, the fact that Biggie fell on his neck and broke his neck in a belly-to-belly suplex. I just read something that said that Scott Hall had a complication in his hip operation, and that he's on life support right now. He's in critical condition.
It was a brutal week for the wrestling business, and I got a very nice response to it. I said, stop using the F word, in this case being fake, because your injuries, your hip replacements, your knee replacements, your divorces, etc., so on, none of this was fake as a result of the professional wrestling business. And Big E breaking his neck. He's lucky he's not paralyzed. He's a big, strong, powerful guy. He'll probably be okay. Whether he'll wrestle again, who knows? But it's no joke. I mean, we've seen men and women die in the ring. So, the fake word is really offensive, especially to wrestlers. I mean, I'm not a wrestler. I'm just an avid, I deeply appreciate the art of pro wrestling. So that's one thing. The second, unfortunately, Buddy, aka Russell, is going to experience what Dr. Mike and I have experienced for decades. Our guests start to die. Guest on our show. And if you don't mind, this is a very, very short piece. I wrote this today. I was just so upset that when I'm upset, I need to write. And I actually started a blog, and Pro Wrestling Post is going to run it, but it's on my Facebook page already. And ironically, Patton Oswalt is mentioned. He was just mentioned on the show, just by sheer coincidence. This will only take like 2 or 3 minutes. It's called "It's Chaos, Be Kind." In one of noted comedian Patton Oswalt's network specials, he speaks of becoming a young widower after his wife dies at the tender age of 46. His wife, a brilliant author, didn't believe in fate, karma, a higher entity's will, or anything along those lines. She exclaimed to him simply, "It's chaos, be kind." Now, I had spoken to my friend JJ McGuire just the other day, and we were planning and scheming as always. JJ was executive producer on a sci-fi spectacular with a script in hand that he was exceedingly proud and excited about. A potential franchise. He had me on board as a producer, desired to bring some pro wrestling legends on as actors, and his mind was going a mile a minute as always. A brilliant musician, best known for his WWE entrance music themes with partner Jimmy Hart, he was also a warm, funny, eclectic, exceedingly polite, and incredibly talented guy who stayed in shape, had boundless energy, and was a shrewd businessman as well. And while COVID considerably slowed our progress with the film, he was ever networking and had an exciting lead for us that he was furiously working on. Hey, Social Security age guys still have dreams too. I was down with anything he said. Simply put, I believed in the guy. Vegas, meeting, spring, set it up, JJ. Hey, let's go for it. But when I went online yesterday and saw a post that JJ had died, I was just reeling and blurted out a shrill and sorrowful, "Oh no," in shock. I just read it over and over again, kept looking at his picture, and realized that, yes, JJ had indeed passed in his sleep, no less. For whatever odd reason, Patton Oswalt popped in my head. It's chaos. Be kind. Hearing my distress, my wife Hong ran out of the bedroom to see what was wrong, but I realized she knew. But just the other night, I had reacted the very same way when my longtime friend and book production guy, Jeff Archer's lovely wife, Anne, also passed. Oh no, has become the horrifying sound of yet another friend died. But I don't think there was ever a louder oh no than that time when I went online to discover to my utter horror that my friend, wrestling legend Johnny Valiant, got mowed down by that vehicle, crossing the very same spot in Pittsburgh he had his entire life. Only this time it was a rainy, misty, foggy, early morn, and the driver didn't see him. All those roads he'd driven, all those miles, and to be killed as a pedestrian in his own backyard. The irony, poor guy didn't know what hit him. We too had spoken a few days before, his voice fresh in my head. We were going to grab some lunch soon. Well, that meal never happened, nor did the one with Nicole Bass, Tiger Khan, Melissa Coates, super wrestling agent Scott Epstein, and so many, many other beloved friends I had just spoken to. It's chaos. Be kind. I practice DDP yoga 3 times a week, go to the gym regularly, take Tai Chi classes, and quite often get the "you look good for your age" amusing semi-compliment. But it dawns on me that if I do indeed live to 100, I'll be burying a whole lot of other friends and exclaiming way too many oh no's than I want to think about. Or I could suddenly drop dead tomorrow because it's chaos. So be kind. That's it. I wrote that today just out of sadness, frustration, anger. 2 friends gone in 4 days. And, as Buddy will attest, we've done over 100 shows, and probably a quarter of them have been honoring dead friends. It's,
No, I think a quarter of them haven't had to deal with somebody dying. The other 75% have had somebody dying on the show. And I just, had to mourn my friend and former talent, Aaron Kamini, who died just 3 weeks ago. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And it just, the only other alternative is that you just don't care. And if you don't care about people, then these things don't matter to you when people die. But if you care, if you take the time to care, you take the time to reach out and get to know somebody. Now, JJ McGuire was not someone I'd ever known prior to this show. And he could have come and passed without me ever acknowledging him. But the fact that we did do this show together, Evan,
you connect.
He became a friend of mine. And he was someone that I really look forward to talking to. And his loss, not as deeply felt as it would be to you, because you were in much closer contact with him, still is significant for me. And my world is a sadder place without him.
Yeah, it's, people have to realize that he was in his late 60s, and people still have dreams and goals and plans, and they're cut short. They're just, and I always have this odd reaction when somebody dies. I just go, wow, I'm never going to speak to him again. Like it just hits you, and it's very painful. It was a rough day today. It was, and one thing I think he'd be pleased with, as a creative person, he devoted his life to creating art. One, everything he did will survive. I mean, those entrance themes and the music he did with the Gentrys, and he would. I think the number. I mean, I hope I'm not I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe it was 114 entrance themes. 114, and they'll play forever.
They're iconic. They're iconic.
Iconic.
They'll be part of wrestling's fabric for all time.
And even more, a lot of it was quality music. It wasn't just like, schlock that they'll toss on today. He explained to us, that this fit that character. This made sense. This, and the music meant something to him. It wasn't just a catchy little ditty. It made sense. And
and not just that, they encapsulate an era. I mean, you hear something like the beginning parts of like Demolition coming in, dun 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 dun. That just, it brings you, it makes you travel back in time to when you first saw those guys get in the ring, or the original parts of Sexy Boy for Shawn Michaels theme. It makes you, transports you back into 1995 or 1997, and suddenly you're that person again. Those are things that I think I know that he knew he touched people, but I don't think he ever knew the incredible depth of how many generations of people he touched with his music. Music has a way of doing that.
Well, with the WWE Network and YouTube and everything else in between, that music will play forever. So he has a piece of immortality. I think that music was instrumental in the Hulkamania rock and wrestling era in putting over the new product. And I think, I think he should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. And he loved Jimmy Hart. He never had a bad word to say about him. He always said, my friend, we're still close. And but he was kind of in Jimmy's shadow because Jimmy was more famous and, a wrestling personality. So I'm happy that in the past few years, his name also got out there, Pro Wrestling Stories and Pro Wrestling Post. And
this very show.
This show, other shows. Jim Phillips worked with him. He has a great autobiography that's out, JJ. So, and art motivates art. I mean, that piece I just read was motivated by JJ. So just by saying, I'm thinking of doing a blog, multiple people contacted me. We want to showcase it. We want to run it. So one thing leads to another. The guy was just a wonderful guy. I mean,
he was.
I spoke to him 3-4 times a month, and
And the sad part is we were going to have him on as a repeat guest, and we just couldn't find the time to get him on here. And you just never know when tomorrow doesn't come, and you never know when that's going to happen.
Also, people are really don't realize that when he was on top with the Gentrys, they had a #1 single. I would talk about like legendary musicians, and he'd always be like, "Oh, I jammed with that guy. We opened for that guy. That guy opened for us." And it's like, I mean, like the biggest names in music history. He had an interesting life, and he was on Thunder in Paradise, so he was even an actor, and he loved wrestling. I mean, he understood the good, bad, and ugly of it, but he loved wrestling and his time in it, and he was working indies in different capacities in recent years, and he was just
even though he was a big part of wrestling, I don't think he ever felt he was above it, or that he was ever more than just a fan like the rest of us are. I think that's when you leave that realm of wrestling when you feel that you're no longer a fan because you're above all of it. And that's where I think
he was very humble.
Yes.
A lot of extremely talented and successful people are humble. A lot of nobodies have egos and are obnoxious. And the strangest thing that happened to me today was William Hurt, who also passed, the great actor William Hurt. He was a Facebook friend of mine. but I did not know him whatsoever. I just work in the film business in different capacities, and we were Facebook friends. So, that guy, he was a talented guy, and I was saddened to hear that as well. And yeah, it's just the past few years have just been very rough between COVID and but I'll tell you though, I was sitting in a nice warm apartment today, and luckily you don't have some lunatic invading your city, your country. You still have to count your blessings, even though life is a challenge. And and let me just say one other thing. As somebody who is also taught English second language, I've taught Ukrainians, I've taught Russians. The average Russian on the street, you can't judge them by their politicians. I mean,
Yeah, thank God nobody tried to judge us for what Trump was doing.
Yeah, my grandfather was from Russia. I mean, he escaped to the United States, the pogroms, and so please don't take it out, because I'm reading like one Russian restaurant after another in the U.S. The business has just plummeted. A lot of these guys escaped depression.
No, if you're going to be mad at someone, take it out on someone that was wearing "I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat" T-shirt a couple of years back, along with their MAGA hats. Those are the ones you need to take it out on. Don't take it out on Russian restaurants, because they don't have anything to do with it. But we're in yet another weird crisis. We go from COVID now to the whole Putin thing. Who knows where it's all going to end up? Anyway, it's good that at least we have this show, that endures through all of this, and that we had our time with JJ, and we were able to give him a chance to really talk about himself, and that show number 17 will live forever in my heart as a special moment.
And thanks to JP Zarka, who posted it today on Pro Wrestling Stories. I didn't ask; it was very gracious of him just to honor the guy. And so I say this all the time, and I know we're running out of time quickly. I'll say it fast. When you create art, even though we're not living off of this and we don't have big sponsors or anything, that show we did with JJ now has real, value to the family, the friends, the fans, and that's why
to us.
Yeah, I mean. It's I was watching some of it today, and I'm like, the guy's gone, and there he is talking, looking healthy, vibrant. So it's there forever. And 20 years from now, a niece or a nephew can go on YouTube and pull that up, and it's meaningful. That's why you do this. It's I'll leave you with this. There's wrestling websites that churn out 12 to 15 pieces of content a day, meaningless, vanilla, pablum, just to generate money. And that's not why you create art. You do it because it's from the heart, and you believe in it, and it's meaningful to you. And if you listen closely just now to Dobie Maxwell, that guy was pouring his heart out, the good, the bad, and the ugly of life on the road, and the sacrifices you make, and it's meaningful. And one day Dobie won't be here, and we won't be here, but this show will be here, and that's why you do it. And just rest in peace, JJ Maguire, Ann Archer, William Hurt, anybody else. There's so many people dying, I lose track. But
we're still here, and we'll be here next week. All right.
We're still here. That's right. Hopefully so.
All right. Well, good night, everybody, and thanks for being here, Evan. Good show. Good night.
Thank you.